I'm really pleased to have you here on Explorations, Terry. It's been a long time coming. We've been friends now for maybe almost 25 years or more. I don't know how long it goes back when we first met at Peabody College, and I've been an admirer of your work and your writing, and so it's a treat to have you on the show with me.
But
And
also, I was very impressed with what you've been doing. Some of the best stuff on story is coming out of your head.
well, yeah, well, you said I think if you stick around and kind of think about stuff for 30 years, something magically happens.
Yeah, either that or you die.
Or you die, whichever comes first. I'm trying to get it all out of my head before I die.
But we both have our hair.
Well, that's true. I've got my hair, although I'm probably a little grayer than you last remembered me when we last saw each other, and
Yeah.
I still have my sense of humor. So that's the important.
Well, me too. If you can't laugh,
Yeah,
you can't live.
that's right. Yeah, I think laughter, story, and aging. If you got to have all of it together.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to talk today with you across a number of topics because you have in your career spanned both business and education and leadership. Um, but years ago, you wrote a little book on story and culture, and the power of story as a tool not only just for forming culture but also for transforming culture. Um, Tell me a little bit about what informed that thinking and how maybe it has evolved since you first wrote that book as you've been thinking about the role of story in organizational culture.
Well, I think culture, as it started out, was something that people were not really dealing with because they were trying to deal with it rationally. And it just doesn't work that way. And so you think about you have a story, but you have a meta story. And a meta story is called a myth. And so the mythology is, when you get into an organization, that's what governs what happens on a day-to-day basis. But because we've become such rational people, we've eliminated the very thing that would make an organization great. So if I go into an organization, first thing I do is ask for stories. And then as you begin to collect those stories, they begin to come together with one kind of a giant story. And so I really found that story alone could almost transform an organization to change its story. So that's kind of what I was doing, and it wasn't cool at first, It was like it's just a story.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's just a story. That's not important.
Yeah,
Let's talk about our P&L or these
yeah.
other things. Yeah.
It's that word just, and I keep telling people, well, wow, it's a story. It's not just a fact, A story will overwhelm a fact anytime.
Mm. One of the things I recall in that little book is that there are people in the organization who are the carriers of the story who have no official title, but they may be the most influential people in that setting.
That's the first thing I would do when I walked into an organization. I would first ask for the priest or priestess.
Oh.
And they're there to take confession, bless things that go, help people deal with things that go wrong. So, and then I would ask for the storyteller. And everyone would know who these people were. They might not know the chief executive officer, but they will know the storyteller. Mm. When I was at Harvard, this guy who was he was into our wonderful stuff that we're dealing with right now on a national level. Well, he was the guy that dealt with the presidency. And one of the things he told me that when you look at legislation, that what passes a bill is a couple of good stories.
Yeah.
Now the information they have to have, just because it's kind of well, you got to be you got to have some data, you know, and so but it was irrelevant. And I think that the funny thing is that people don't realize that they get all caught up in all this stuff. And if you want to look at strategic planning, for example, the guy that wrote strategic planning, he wrote the second book about 2 years later, The Life and Death of Strategic Planning. But you see, people get all caught up in it and they don't realize if you want strategic planning, tell a good story.
Yeah, years ago, and I think you came to the event, one of the events at the International Storytelling Center that I helped organize on story in business. But there was one of the people who was there. He had worked with the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and their executive was having to go to the Hill to defend their budget, and there was a move afoot to kill the TVA budget or to
Yeah.
privatize it or whatever. And instead of bringing charts and data and all the stuff that you would traditionally bring, the person just told a story about one family whose life had been improved by the TVA and because of their work that they did. uh, and it was the kind of thing is that when he was done, it would have been very hard for this person to kind of come down on the TVA. He would have looked like an insensitive clod, and the budget passed. Yeah.
That's a very common thing in my experience. One of the school districts, our schools these days they've been so pumped full of test scores and rationality and all those things, and that's not what makes a school tick. And so I worked with a large school district in Oregon, and they were having trouble, and so they one I was working with them to kind of begin to see how they could improve, and so they decided to have a storytelling hour, and this is a group of about 200, and so they had a applause meter so they could tell how much the story would get into people. Well, the winner was a story which I'll tell you now. Um, it's one of the teachers, and she was having actually she was the principal, and she had a problem because uh, she walked into in her office came this little boy, well, and the teacher carried him by the nape of his neck, and uh, she said, what?" He said, "I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to class." She said, "Well, you have to go back to class." And so she was searching then for something she could do to get this kid willing to go back to class. So she's the cafeteria worker there said, "Well, you know, my husband has a dog," and the kid said he'd rather suck the snot out of the dog than he'd go back to school. And so she brought this dog in, a little Lhasa Apso, and she took it and she put it right in front of the kid and said, "Go ahead." He said, "What?" "Go ahead. You go back to class there. Take the snot out of that dog." Now, and he says, "I think I'll go back to class."
Yeah.
You see now that district now has every once a year they gather together and tell stories,
Mm.
and that is probably one of the most successful school districts I've ever seen.
Terrific. And yeah, so I want to talk to you a little more about education.